What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 79, and this is a special interview with episode. We have a special guest on the line. We'll be introducing that guest very, very soon. First of all, as I like to do at the beginning of every single episode, is to throw out my social media plugs so you know where to get a hold of us if you want to say hi. On Twitter, we are @withjohners_pod. So that's @withjohners_pod on Twitter. On Instagram, you can find us instagram.com/wrestlingwithjohners. And of course, go out and search our fun and popular and friendly and interactive Facebook community page. Just search Wrestling with Johners, and that's Johners spelled Johners. And of course, if you enjoy listening to this podcast, please don't forget to hit subscribe so that you can be notified every time a new episode drops. And you can find the Wrestling with Johners podcast on all popular podcast platforms, including Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and YouTube. We've been doing a lot of work to our YouTube page of late, so please go and check it out for all of our audio podcasts and some exclusive video podcasts up there as well. Plus, tons of exclusive content, including my vlogs from all of the wrestling shows I attend over the last few years, and any exclusive interviews are up there as well, and tons more. Now, please spread the word. Like I say, give us a follow on all of our social media pages and subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channels today. It helps get even more people listening to the Wrestling with Johners podcast. So today we do have a special guest. It is a special interview with episode. And Wrestling with Johners will be doing quite a bit of work in connection with a certain wrestling group coming out of Essex called Independent Wrestling Elite UK. And the first person I'm going to be interviewing in conjunction with that wrestling group is a gentleman by the name of Jack Alexander, otherwise known as Xander, his wrestling name. So, Jack, good evening. How are you doing?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
Very good. It's excellent to have you on board and excellent to be speaking to you. Like I say, this interview is really going to be to find out about you, your love for wrestling and your career so far. And so that my listeners can find out all about Xander, I suppose, and get familiar with yourself as a wrestling fan and as a wrestling character. So first of all, Jack, I want to find out a little bit about how it all began for you. I'm assuming that you've been a lifelong wrestling fan, but when did you first come across professional wrestling? What was your first kind of recollection or first glimpses of professional wrestling? Take me back to that day when your eyes popped wide open and you kind of fell in love with pro wrestling.
That day. So I haven't been a lifelong fan, surprisingly. I got into it quite late, which is quite sad. I got into it when I was in my early teens, so I was probably about 13, 14. I miss the whole era of action figures as a child. I'm very disappointed.
That's a shame.
I never got one of those big old plastic Hell in a Cells to play with as a kid.
It's never too late.
It's never too late. I may have to do it. But I got into it when I was about 13, 14. It was my parents that got me into it. My stepdad was massively into wrestling, and he used to watch it with my mum a lot. And I would see it every now and then, but the first time I ever sat down and properly watched a match, and I can remember this vividly, was WrestleMania 27, which is regarded as not the best WrestleMania, but
right.
it happened to have one of the best matches at WrestleMania, in my opinion, which was the second Undertaker versus Triple H match, which was just absolutely fantastic. And I remember that being the first wrestling match that ever drew me in, and I was like, whoa, that was awesome.
You were hooked from that moment onwards.
Oh yeah, I've always been a massive Undertaker mark. That was the moment where I knew I loved it.
So I was going to ask you about some of your favourite wrestlers. So you've mentioned the Undertaker. Any other kind of wrestlers that have really captured your imagination and been favourites of yours ever since?
Oh god, yeah. It's mainly like the characters. I admire wrestlers who are just wrestlers, but I love the wacky and zany. Like, the guys who draw me in are Sami Callihan, Jon Moxley, Bray Wyatt, Rhino as well. Like, those guys drew me in, and I could just tell like those were they just have a certain aura about them. Like they go into the ring and that they're just about to fuck shit up.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And so how would you say that your love for pro wrestling as a fan has changed since you've got older, and especially now that you're part of the business, you're involved in the business yourself? How would you say your kind of your fandom as a wrestling fan as you've got older has changed, Jack?
Well, I think as most people get older, they start to refine their tastes a little bit, and they start branching out. Like obviously, when I first started watching, I watched the most available product to me, which was WWE, as most people get into it to start with. But as you get older, you start experiencing, and you can start going to local shows, and you can start looking for more in-depth stuff online. So you start watching stuff that's from Japan, you start watching stuff that's from Mexico, and you start breeding out. You start developing your taste for it. Like I've always liked WWE. Lately they've been a bit weird, but my tastes have definitely branched out quite a lot more now. I definitely watch a lot more indie stuff. Like BritWres is massive. Like there's so many promotions and there's so much free content online. You'll just look online and you can find anything, any style, anything, and it's just all great. Like a lot of the time when I'm in the gym and I'm doing cardio, I'll just go on Google, I'll go on YouTube, and I'll just find like a random match on YouTube. It could be from any promotion anywhere, and I'll just watch it. I really enjoy watching something that isn't popularized, like seeing these indie guys doing random cool moves that you haven't seen anyone do before. I really enjoy seeing the inventiveness behind some people.
Yeah, I mean, along them lines, I mean, the wrestling product has really changed and developed and grown at a pace. I mean, you just look at this year alone, where you've had AEW come into the fold, and the growth of NXT to the point where it's being shown 2 hours per week on network TV, and independent wrestling, I don't care what anybody says, is still very, very strong. It's still very, very healthy. But what's your thoughts on the current product then, Jack, in terms of, obviously the continued growth of the business and the availability of so many different promotions, as you mentioned, that's out there, a touch of a finger, really, a touch of a button. But what's your kind of thoughts on the wrestling product that's available to fans currently? I suppose I'm kind of hinting at AEW and some of the newer promotions as well, really.
I think it's awesome. Wednesday nights are an absolute God's gift to any wrestling fan. If you have NXT, which is producing the best wrestling product that WWE has ever produced, and you also have AEW, which is producing a nice, fresh take on wrestling, and everything AEW is doing is different. They're doing storylines that have great resolutions. They're developing brand new characters, which the country hasn't even seen before, and they're doing it brilliantly. Like everything about AEW I really love. There's not much they've done that I can say, oh, I'm not too sure about that. And the same goes for NXT. Both of them are absolutely brilliant. As far as the actual climate goes, I feel like there's definitely a lot of promotions popping up these days. And to a certain point, you got to think to yourself, are they starting to oversaturate the market? Which is great for great for guys like us who want to work every weekend, work every weekday, and get out there. But you've got to wonder how many times a wrestling fan can go to a show and watch the same match over and over again. So I think it's good and bad at the same time.
Yeah, and do you get a chance to attend any wrestling shows yourself when you're not busy working? When you're not busy wrestling, I should say.
Oh yeah, I mean I've been injured for the last 5 months, so I've taken the pleasure of being able to sit as an audience member and watch some of my mates wrestle, and being able to go out and to these shows just as a fan.
So what injury are you currently carrying then, Jack?
In July I fractured and dislocated my wrist in a death match.
Ouch. Yeah,
I was in a match with the lovely Clint Majera. He's absolute top bloke, loving the pieces. And it was one in a million chances. It was one of those ones where it's just like, if you thought about the positioning, it would have been all right. But I was lying down with a chair on my chest, and he did a rolling thunder onto the chair, and it was just because I had my hand propped underneath it, all the weight came down on my wrist and just popped it out completely.
Wow. Okay. And did that match continue? Did you have to kind of end the match?
No.
It did end promptly.
I looked over at my wrist, and I promptly screamed profanities and ran backstage.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
yeah. There was
That
at no point did it cross my mind that I wanted to stay in that ring because, good lord, there
too
was a
painful.
split. There was a split second in my mind where I was like, maybe it's not as bad as it hurts, and then I looked over at my hand, and it looked like the Harry Potter lightning bolt, and I thought, nope, I'm not staying here.
You're not continuing with this one, but there we go. So I want to ask you about when you first started training, then, Jack. So when did it begin for you? When did the training as a pro wrestler start for you? How long ago? And just kind of set the scene as far as kind of who you started training with, what training school it was, what wrestling school. Set the scene on when you first started training, then, Jack.
So I think I was around 18, and I think I was about 3-4 stone heavier than I was right now. And my hair was not nearly as long. And I was scrolling through I've always had the dream of being a professional wrestler. I think there's certain people when they watch wrestling, it just infects them. They're like, oh my God, I need to do that. But there was always a part of me that knew that I needed to do that. So when I was just scrolling through Facebook one day and I just happened to see a sponsored ad pop up for a school that was opening fairly close to where I was. It was about half hour down the road by car. By train, it was about 2 hours. But so it was very close to me. So it was one of those spur of the moment, like it was on the same day that I was looking at it, and I just kind of packed all my stuff and just went straight for it. There was no hesitation behind it. I just literally, I saw it, I packed up, and I just went. And I'm really thankful that I did that.
Well, I was going to ask you about kind of a bit about that process, and I was kind of wondering whether it was a daunting process, but it sounds like you had no hesitation. It was something that you had a desire to do, and you kind of jumped straight into it, basically.
Oh, I mean, I definitely I was definitely shitting it all the way down there. Like that. Yeah, I was very, very worried about going to it because I was never an athletic kid. I never did any sports as a kid. I was very much nerdy, sit behind my PC, and I never played any type of football or any sort of that. So when so it was very daunting going down there, and I didn't know anyone going down there either. So going to my first session, it was just it was terrifying, but I was it was very fun. My school, I still go to it now, it's still up and running, and they're still doing very well, is School of Slam. They're located in Harwich. It's run by Mark Young, and the lead trainer is Paul Tyrrell, absolute legend in the scene, 20-year vet. And and Paul's taught me everything I know, and yeah.
Did you know anybody? I mean, when you stepped through the doors on day one, did you know anybody that was there already, or did you go in not knowing anybody? That sounds like quite a daunting process. I mean, was there anybody there that you recognised? Nobody.
No, not at all. The weird part was though, there was a Sting thing that ran a few months back. It was the same guy, Mark Young, who runs Wrestling League. He ran like a Sting meetup and show as well, and quite a few of the guys that were at the training session were also at the Sting thing. So when I look back at when I was there, I can remember everyone that was there. So it's very weird. It's very weird how wrestling's such a small world, how it all works out together. But yeah, no, I knew no one there at all. And luckily, I made friends and people brought me into their groups, and I've met some of my closest best friends through wrestling. So,
yeah. So tell me about kind of your first few training sessions. Then, I mean, that the big step, turning up on day one, then learning the basics, taking your first bumps. I mean, was there anything there that almost put you off from going back on day two?
No, nothing put me off. I went every week without a doubt. I've always been a religious trainer. Like for the last 3.5 years, I will be there almost every weekend training. But yeah, the first bump always sucks. And especially because you'll never do your first bump correctly. So you'll land on your coccyx or you'll land on your lower back, and then you get winded when you do it properly, and it's just always awful. But I've seen people come into a wrestling ring and they get their first bump down properly within an hour, and unfortunately I was not one of those people. It was a very, very long process for me to actually become somewhat moderately okay at what I do.
But you obviously stuck at it, and it was enjoying the process throughout.
Oh yeah, I loved it. I loved even though I was terrible at it, I still loved learning, and I still love watching what eventually became my friends being really good at it as well. But yeah, I was genuinely awful. It took me near on a year just to be able to do a flip bump properly. But that's because I feel like I couldn't ever go over my head properly. So I had this massive. I think it's mainly conquering the fear inside my own head about it all, than it was actually physically doing it.
So you said you started training at 18. At what age or how long into the training process before you made your pro wrestling debut?
I think I was about a year and a half, 2 years into training.
Okay.
Luckily, so our process is we have School of Slam, which is our school promotion, and we also have Wrestling League, which is the pro promotion. So basically, School of Slam feeds into Wrestling League, like NXT into WWE.
Yeah.
So luckily, School of Slam, it actually was located at a camp. So during the summer and during some of the off months as well, we would be running camp shows pretty much every month. So whilst I wasn't on pro shows, I was performing in front of 50 to 150 people with camp crowds. And I'm sure as the veterans will tell you, like, camp crowds are the best way to gain experience.
And how long have you been wrestling for to date then? So you started training when you was 18. Your first match was a year and a half to 2 years later. How long have you been?
First match.
First match.
Because I count pro and actual first match as completely different things.
Okay.
So my first match I was in a battle royal like a month in, and I've got the footage of it, and it's truly awful. Well,
I was going to ask, going back to that first match. I mean, what was it like? It must have been a thrilling experience, but look. I suppose if I look back on my first podcast, it would have been, cringeworthy. But what are your recollections of that first match?
Oh, it was amazing because I don't know if you know anything about my gimmick now, but when I came out, I looked it's so completely different. I came out to like pendulum slam, and I came out as this happy, chirpy little baby face. And I remember it, and I remember the butterflies going into it, and honestly, it's a battle royal, so it's probably the easiest thing I've ever done. But yeah, I remember going into it, and I remember being so ecstatic, and I had my parents in the crowd watching, and I feel bad that they had to watch that, but they were there for the first one, There's always got to be a first.
Yeah. So when did you realise that you kind of had a bit of a knack for this wrestling lark then? You're actually getting quite good. I mean, you've been wrestling for a number of years now. So how kind of far into the process before you kind of thought, I'm kind of starting to get a taste for this, and I'm starting to become quite a good wrestler, even if it was in your own head? I mean, how long did that take, and when did you realise you were starting to get quite good at this?
This is going to sound so negative, but I've never truly believed that I am a great wrestler.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, no, I always end up nitpicking my own work. I think like when I realized I was a okay wrestler was when my coach said that I had a really good match. Like that was like, because he's very hard to please, and when he said like, yeah, that was good, I was really pleased with it. And like I had people say it to me now, and I'm so thankful for the kind things people say to me. But I still find it so hard to believe, because you're
your harshest critic.
Oh god, yeah. Any wrestler will tell you they'll watch back their match. They could do 100 awesome things, but they'll go, "Yeah, but you didn't quite grip that wrist lock well enough, though, did you? You didn't quite sell that enough, did you?" It's always the same. I'm
indeed.
Horrible critic on myself, but no, it was about I was a late bloomer. I think it would have been I think this year I really got into my stride this year. I think end of 2018 this year, I was really, really happy with the work that I was putting out. and I was feeling more and more confident going into matches and putting stuff together. And yeah, it's a shame considering what happened in July. But yeah, I felt like I was having a pretty decent year. I was well on my way to achieve some of my goals this year. But hey ho, we move on.
Yeah. And although this is in conjunction with Independent Wrestling Elite UK, we spoke off air earlier on about some of the other promotions that you've wrestled for. Just give them a bit of a shout out to the other promotions that you've had the honour of working with over the last few years then, Jack.
Yeah, so like the main people that brought me in to begin with were DOA. They were my first outside booking, and I love the guys at DOA. They're absolutely fantastic. Yeah, some of the guys I've met through them as well. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, Dropkicks as well. I've worked for Falling Star, which is a promotion up in Norwich. They were quite fun to work with, and then IWE. They were they were some of the first guys that brought me in consecutively for bookings, which I really liked. I worked for HEW, which is a Essex-based promotion. Worked for ORW, which is a Clacton-based promotion. Another one that brought me in and trusted me with one of their top guys almost immediately was UBW, Ultimate British Wrestling. They were fantastic. I love the promoter that runs that, Paul Ash. He's an absolute genius, and I love working for those guys. They were so kind, and they just brought me in and put me against CJ Carter in like this big hardcore match, and it was super fun. Like I really enjoyed it. And yeah, and another one is New Force Wrestling as well. They brought me in. I got to run Babyface there as well, and I never get to run Babyface, so that was really enjoyable. And I also worked one show with IPW as well.
Yeah, and of course IWE. So you've obviously had quite a few matches with IWE UK. Tell us about your experiences working for Frankie's promotion.
That was brilliant. So I was really surprised because I messaged their Facebook page and I dropped them the CV and I was like, hey, can I come work for you guys? And they were like, yeah, you look awesome. We love Gothic wrestlers. And I was like, oh my God, someone who actually likes a goth wrestler. So yeah, my experience working with them so far has been absolutely amazing. Like some of the guys that put me up against Rob Sharp. Like they didn't have to do that. They brought Rob Sharp in as like a way of like gifting and giving experience to some of the guys, and they put a second show that they brought me back for. They put me up against Rob Sharp, and that's probably one of the biggest guys I've wrestled against, and I'm really thankful for that. Like they didn't have to do that, and they saw a lot of potential in me, and I'm really happy that they saw it because I'm ridiculously hungry to get out there.
Definitely. So you mentioned earlier about being a goth wrestler. I'm really interested to find out more about your gimmick. So your wrestling name is obviously XANDER. We've mentioned that. Tell us a bit about your gimmick, your look. Tell us a bit about what influenced your style as far as your look and your presentation, Jack.
My gimmick's like been a constant evolving thing ever since I first started. I've always tried to change it up or try and be a little bit different. I've always admired the guys that wear face paint. I love face paint wrestlers. I think it for me, it's a mask. Like I can put on the face paint and then I'm someone else, you know? So my character is he's this big death metal character, corpse paint, big leather jackets, you know, death metal, all that sort of stuff. One thing I coined over the last 8 months before was he's the goth daddy, which really
I like that.
Yeah, and it's just he's the incarnate of like death metal, you know. It's the white and black corpse paint, and as I progressed with the character, it got more and more crazy. Like I started doing it started off ridiculously neat, and then I started doing it with my fingers, and I started drawing words up and down my arms and my body and stuff like that, just to progress and become a bit different.
Sounds awesome. Sounds absolutely awesome. And going on from your gimmick and your look, how would you describe your wrestling style? So, I mean, you mentioned earlier that you was in a death match, which led to your wrist injury. But is that kind of your wrestling style or your preferred gimmick match of choice? Tell us a bit more about your kind of wrestling style, and if we were to watch you in the ring, what we would expect to see.
I think the easiest way to describe my style is suicidal. Honestly, I love doing like I like doing spots that people wouldn't do, because they'd be like, oh, I wouldn't do that, because it's just like, yeah, but I'm gonna go do that, and then you're gonna be like, oh, like very very hard hitting, very very I do like a lot of strikes. I like doing dives because they're a lot of fun. It's very very fast paced sort of very fast paced sort of movement, and yeah. I always like doing the unpredictable as well. I always like doing the snazzy reversals, or trying to figure out a move that you wouldn't have seen before, or like a way of doing a move in like getting into a move that you wouldn't have seen before.
And do you think this quite serious wrist injury that you've just experienced, do you think that's going to affect your wrestling style when you do eventually get back into the ring?
I'll tell you what, I'm not going to be doing any rolling thunders with a chair on my chest anytime soon.
That would be sensible. Yeah, I can see that.
I got to be honest, I'm not going to rush back into the death matches straight away, but I think I'm not going to change my style, because that's who I am. You know, I would rather, I wouldn't want to go back and just be, and I respect, I wouldn't want to go back and be something that I'm not. So, but the one thing that it's taught me is that I need to think about what I do and the placement of how I do things, because you know, before I used to just think about like, oh, I just do this move, and then I just do that, or we could just do this. But now this has happened, and now I can see it in my mind that I've got to think about how I'm going to do it, how I'm going to land, how the move's going to land afterwards, if that makes sense. Because I don't want, it would have taken 5 seconds for me to think about like, oh, if I'm holding this chair from underneath, I'm probably gonna break my hand. But you know, it's little things like that. You never think about the little things until it's too late.
Yeah, and you say you've been out for 5 months now, Jack. So what's the kind of prognosis? I mean, how much longer do you think you're going to be out for? Have you started training yet, or when do you plan to start training?
Yeah, so I've been training for about the last month. It's been really good. Like the first training session I went back, I was so scared, and everyone was telling me to get out of the ring. But yeah, no, it's been going good. Like I've been doing physiotherapy on it as well, and I've been able to put a lot of pressure back on it, and I've been able to do press ups on it, and overall it's just been healing really well. Like training sessions are really good as well. Like I can bump properly without like worrying about actually hurting myself again, which is really nice.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And going back to your wrestling style, are there any wrestlers that you've kind of modeled yourself on, or modeled your wrestling style after?
Sami Callihan for sure.
Right.
I love Sammy's style. I love he's got such a weird style, and I love throwing pump kicks as well. So if you watch a Sammy match, he'll throw about 3-4 pump kicks, and I'm exactly the same.
So let's turn things around a little bit then, Jack. So what do you like to do when you're not wrestling? So obviously you've got a huge passion for wrestling, but is there anything else you're passionate about? Any hobbies, any interests, anything else you like to do when you're not inside a square circle?
Yeah, sure. One thing about me is that I am nothing like my character. I'm such a huge nerd outside of all of this thing. One of my favorite things is I love to play D&D. Like I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons nerd. Absolutely love it to pieces. But you know, I stay true to the character a little bit. You know, I play a warlock, so.
Fair enough. And what about any sporting, any musical interests, anything like that, or you just kind of like more of a computer game or board game fan, that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, I tried to play a musical instrument as a kid, and to coin Futurama, I have what my music teacher called stupid fingers.
So D&D it is then.
Yeah, I cannot play a musical instrument for love nor money. I am awful at it, truly awful.
So focusing back into your wrestling career then, so you've obviously had a mixture of tag matches and singles matches. Have you had many tag matches, Jack? And out of the two, kind of, do you have a preference? Do you like one over the other, or do you prefer to kind of go it alone when you're in the ring?
Oh, they're both massively different base. Like one of the big things I had trouble with was when I started doing tag matches, I didn't know how to do them because the psychology of a tag match is so completely different to a singles. But I really enjoy both for different aspects. I really enjoy tag matches because you don't have to do as much. But I also really enjoy singles matches because most of the attention's on you, which is great as well. And you can figure out tag matches are so difficult to me, but I really enjoy them because one, it's a challenge. I really enjoy challenging myself in wrestling, and two, I get to work with people that I really like. Like I'm ridiculously looking forward to working with Frankie.
Yeah, and what would you say is some of your standout matches that you've had so far in your your career? So any matches that you really enjoyed, you thought were absolutely standout matches, and tell us a bit about some of your favourite matches that you've been involved in.
Okay, cool. So going back, now that I'm thinking about it, they've all gone out of my head. One of my favourite matches that I had in 2008 was versus Drew Parker. That was a that was a really fun match. I basically just I went up to my promoter and I was like, look, dude, I really want a good death match. And he was like, yeah, cool, we're bringing Drew Parker then. I was like, whoa.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a huge like well, you asked for it, now prove yourself. And yeah, I went and did it. And it was freaking awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we did everything in that. I actually made my own weapon for it as well, which was quite funny.
Awesome. And any others that jump to mind?
Yeah, sure. There was a triple threat that where I won my first title in. I really loved that. That was just that was so super fun, and I really loved the two guys I was working in there with, which is Aaron Warnes and Callum Chuck. Love both of them to pieces. And there was a match I had recently. Well, I say recently, back in June, which was against CJ Carter, and that was at Wrestling League as well, which was a hardcore match, and that was so much fun because me and CJ just have ridiculously good chemistry with each other. Like the first time that we ever had a match against each other, we were talking like, oh, I do this move and this move and this move, and we're like, oh wait, I also do that move. So
nice.
We have awesome chemistry, and yeah, and we tore the house down with that one. He came in as like a fresh face as well, and he was fully over by the end of it. The crowd were chanting his name, and I got to do Legos, which crossed the last bump off my.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah, that was on my bucket list. I had three things on my bucket list, bumping bucket list, which were table, thumbtacks, and Legos.
Wow, you've done all three.
Yes.
Crikey. Just to look into the future then, so are there any wrestlers that you would like to be in the ring with that you haven't had the chance to wrestle so far? So any kind of future opponents that are on your bucket list?
Oh god, you put me on the spot here. Clint Majera, mainly because our last match just ended in such a sad way. Like I really want that opportunity just to do it again, like just to be able to just to be able to refresh and be like, okay, cool, let's go and do the match that we originally planned out.
Yeah.
There's one of my friends at my school. His name's Richie Rich. I really want to match against him. He's absolutely brilliant. The Bone Brothers as well. They're a tag team that's cracking around Essex and just like the whole of southeast of England at the moment. They're awesome. Paul Robinson as well. I'd love to have a match against Paul.
Oh, he's one of my favourites.
He's super cool. I'd love to have a match against Paul Robinson. That's
a pretty good list already.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid list.
And what motivates you as a wrestler then, Jack? So what keeps you motivated? What kind of motivates you before you go into the ring? And what keeps you kind of passionate about professional wrestling?
I think it's just like I really it's a way to express myself creatively. Like it's a way for me to show who I am as a person, go out there and tell a story and entertain people in the only way that I know how, because I can't play an instrument, I can't sing, but I can go out there and I can fight people and tell a story, and if I can entertain one person, that's all I need. If I can make a crowd pop, or if I can make them boo me, as long as I have, that rest assured that I've gone out there and I've entertained a crowd to the best of my capability, and I've just made someone's weekend a little bit better. That's all I really want. I just want to make everyone have a good time.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And are there any wrestlers, either kind of famous, working with WWE, or maybe on the independent circuit that have really inspired you over the years? Not necessarily in terms of your gimmick or your wrestling style, but that you really looked up to, and somebody that's kind of inspired you to be a better wrestler or maybe a better person. Anybody out there that you want to give a shout out to?
I mean, like, it's so weird, but like Aleister Black, I think, is probably up there because like his progression from the Indies, from Tommy End, going into WWE and being that like that satanic character, and like he seems like such a lovely bloke. Like everything that he puts out on Twitter just seems like the loveliest stuff in the world, and I just really respect his work ethic and everything that he does. He's definitely he's up there.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And speaking of kind of influences and mentors, what's the biggest bit of advice that you've been given that's really helped you so far in your wrestling career?
If you think you're going slow, go slower.
Right.
It's
you hear that quite a lot actually from wrestlers, to slow down and slow down even more and to tell that story.
Oh god, yeah, no, I was awful for it when I first started, and it's taken me a long time, but yeah, I finally learned how to pace.
Yeah, and looking into the future, so you've already started your rehab and your training. So looking into 2020, just around the corner, do you have any future goals then, Jack? So you're hoping to obviously be back in the ring early into the new year. What does 2020 have in store for XANDER?
Honestly, it's just getting back into it and being able to perform in front of people again. I had a lot of goals this year, which unfortunately I didn't get to achieve because of what happened. But my goal for next year is honestly just to get back in the ring and just do what I love every week, every month, as long as and hopefully like every weekend. Like genuinely, if I could, that's a goal. If I can do it every weekend, I'll be happy.
Yeah, and are there any kind of independent companies that you'd like to work for that you haven't done so already?
Oh, Riptide. Riptide, so cool. I've gone down to Riptide a few times, and they are genuinely probably the coolest promotion out there. The way they film, the stories they put on, just the way they present themselves, I love it to pieces.
Awesome. Listen, final question then, Jack, before we wrap up this interview. If you had one message to give to your rivals or to the wrestling world in general, what would it be?
I'm coming back.
He's coming back, ladies and gentlemen. He's coming back. 2020 is going to be his year. Listen, Jack, XANDER, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming on the Wrestling with Johners podcast. It's been an absolute delight to speak to you. Before we let you go, though, do you have any social media plugs, any handles that you want to kind of throw out there so that my listeners can get in touch with you, say hi, or potentially if there's a promoter that wants to get in touch with you, how can they?
Yeah, sure. I'm pretty sure on all social media, it's XANDER TGK. So on Twitter, it's at XANDER TGK. On Instagram, it's XANDER TGK. And I'm pretty sure on Facebook, it's exactly the same as well. So there you go.
There we go. Well, I'm sure that XANDER's handles will be included in all of the tweets and Facebook posts, so you can get hold of him that way as well. But Jack, thank you so much for coming on the Wrestling with Johners podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the experience, buddy.
I have, thank you.
No, you're very welcome. And you never know, we could get to speak to you somewhere down the line. Hopefully when you're back in the ring and we can kind of catch up with you again when you're fully fit and active. But thank you very much. So that's pretty much all from this interview with Jack Alexander, otherwise known as XANDER. We look forward to doing more interviews in conjunction with Independent Wrestling Elite UK in the future. So stay tuned for those. Our next Wrestling with Johners podcast episode will be dropping on Saturday, where we'll cover our usual NXT and AEW Dynamite. We'll also be doing our NXT TakeOver War Games and Survivor Series predictions. So that's on our next episode, which will be dropping on Saturday. But in the meantime, please keep it tuned to the Wrestling with Johners podcast for all of your weekly NXT and AEW updates, including WWE and AEW pay-per-views and so much more, of course. And if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, please don't forget to spread the word, tell your friends and tell your family, and don't forget to subscribe to the Wrestling with Johners podcast so you don't miss out on a single episode. In the meantime, from myself and from Jack, it's goodbye from us, and have yourself a great week. Thank you very much for listening.